Welcome to the Burgundy and Gold Knuckleheads podcast. And as always, my main man Reggie fighting off the juju that we had to deal with in New Orleans, man. What's going on, Reggie?
you know, I didn't think it was juju, but the way we played on Sunday, it might have been some bad juju, man. They heard you talking trash about the city.
Yeah. I mean, you warned me. You said to stay away from it, and I was dancing with it, right? I was dancing with the devil there. Uh, Everybody can blame me, but we got through it. We got through it. But it was an interesting game, Reg. And I'll say, starting out, what you got to say is a win is a win is a win in the NFL. Every win is a tough win, and this wasn't the prettiest win, but Washington walked away with a win down in New Orleans.
Well, um, that ain't the word that comes to mind for me. Interesting is not the word that comes to mind. But I will say this, man. Speaking of as you were saying that, you said wins a win when they talk about the NFL, and there's some truth to that. But if you got two good teams
Mm-hmm.
and it's an ugly game, and you go, "Hey, man, it's a win's a win," or you got two bad teams and you go, "Hey, man, it was an ugly game, but a win's a win."
Right.
But when you got a good team and a bad team, and the good team barely wins, I don't know that a win's a win applies to this, right? But I'm not going to go on a rant because to me this wasn't an interesting win. To me, it was a we got lucky, and it was very ugly. I think we got lucky. We're very fortunate, and I'll just say, man, we talked about on the last podcast as we were doing the pregame for this. I was concerned about rust, and I don't know if it was rust. Was it the last minute uh scrape scratching of our starting center, Tyler Bialish? But I don't know. But to be playing second and third string quarterback for a team that is missing their star wide receiver, and all they had was a running back, and yet we played.
And he was
We
out a
played.
good bit of the fourth quarter.
Yeah. We played 60 minutes and 3 seconds, right? Cause we'll talk about the extra.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
played a game 60 minutes and 3 seconds,
yeah.
and it took every bit of that.
I watched. We'll get to it, but I watched that uh thing that you're talking about there, and I got my stopwatch out on my phone, and it's almost 5 seconds. Everybody says three. It's almost five. It's like 4.5 seconds, and I timed it like 3 or 4 times to make sure I was getting it just right. Um, but it was part of it was ugly. It's one of those games where you're like, you just scratch your head, and there's just several directions to go on this. Um, the concern about Jaden Daniels being rusty was not it, right? Because if Jaden Daniels didn't have the game that he had, um, he was 25 for 31, 81% completion, rushed 11 times for another 66 yards. Uh, that's not what I want my quarterback to do. That's not what I want my rookie quarterback to do. But if Jaden wasn't on, other than his three deep balls, if he was, if he wasn't on like he was, man, Washington would have been in trouble this game. Nine penalties, 9 penalties. That is a lot of penalties, man. Um, Two or three of them definitely questionable. The
Both of
roughing the
those, both of
quarterback,
those roughing the passer on Dante Fowler was BS.
and I thought the uh, pass interference, whatever the call was, illegal use of hands to St. Juice was that was a weak call also. That was basically at the line of scrimmage. He wasn't really holding on to anybody. That right there happens probably once every three plays in the NFL, and most of the time it doesn't get called. But there were some holding penalties, and it was just from a penalty perspective, Washington was trying to do everything they could to make it hard on themselves.
Well, again, I know you don't want to say necessarily that it was rust, but the layoff still could have affected the team because again, you're talking about penalties, you're talking about some of the drops, you're talking about it just the team and the offense just did not flow. But speaking of penalties,
Hmm.
I saw the stat that there's a trend here. And early in the season, the offensive line didn't allow a lot of sacks. There wasn't a lot of penalties on the offense. But the
Okay.
last 3 games, there's a trend between Dallas, Tennessee, and the Saints game this past Sunday. Penalties committed 10 against the Cowboys, 9 against the Titans, and 9 against New Orleans Saints. That's bad. It's bad, brother. You can't,
I
you
remember
can't,
the Cowboys, and I remember yesterday. I didn't recall that the Titans was that bad. But
because they
yes,
was blowing
if
them out.
pardon me,
They've blown them out. And so for the past 3
right,
consecutive games, you've almost had 30 penalties in 3 games. You're averaging almost 10 penalties a game. That's bad. That's bad for business. And you cannot be successful in this league with those kinds of numbers, man.
right,
Because they're drive killers, right?
right. Um, and kind of to pick up at the beginning of the game, Washington came out looking pretty good defensively. They were the first half. The Saints couldn't hardly do anything. They were they looked like a team with a second, third string quarterback. Um, he had a play or two, but he had some plays where he just looked bad. Didn't know where he was going with the ball, kind of almost blindly throwing it a couple times. That probably he got lucky a couple times that the passes should have been intercepted. Midway through the third quarter, Washington was winning 17-0. Game is going well, and then on a I don't even know what the a pitch and pass play where I still say he was not in bounds. They got on the scoreboard and gave him hope, right?
Yeah, but
And
again, man, I'm sorry, go ahead.
well, and you're so at that point you haven't started the fourth quarter. You just scored, and when you're about to kind of just go, man, this game is over with, man. You scored touchdown, and they're like, well, maybe we get a couple stops and get another score, and we're right back in this game, and that's kind of what happened, and ended up being close down to the game, down to the wire there.
But you're looking at it from the point they scored, man. I'm just gonna look at it from the halftime, right?
Okay.
So to go into the half, uh, it's pretty much a shutout at this point,
Yep.
14-0 at the half. And the Saints decided to make a quarterback change. They went from that Jake Hayner guy to Spencer Rattler at halftime.
Right.
And at that point, it's a 14. He's down. He's coming into a game offensively. Saints look terrible. They're down 2 touchdowns. The Saints go on and score 19 points in the second half. That's a defensive thing. And Washington offensively scored 6 points. And we've seen this trend, but
Well,
it's a problem, man. I don't care what nobody can tell me anything different. And here we are at this point, week 14, 15 of the season, and we're still having some of these issues, and this is not good. And I recognize it's just who we are. We just got to
right.
recognize who we are, but it still doesn't mean it's a good thing.
Well, it's funny
You
that you
should
should
not
bring
be
that up. It's funny you
you
should
should not
bring
be
that up,
getting shut
Reggie.
out like that.
Yeah. We're on the same wavelength of how we're looking at this game. As far as towards the back quarter, third to a quarter of the game. Um, Washington Commanders defense in the fourth quarter. Uh, as far as fourth quarter defense giving up points out of 32 teams, where do you think the Washington Commanders are, Reg?
I already know the stat. We're last.
Last. We are 32nd out of 32 teams, right? We're not
Yeah.
30th. We're 32nd, averaging, basically 10 points average. Um the the 5 games that we lost, I went and looked at that. Four out of 5 of those we gave up 7 or more points with an average of 13.6. Right? That's not how you finish games against tough teams, right? You lost against, other than the Cowboys, you lost against playoff teams, but those are the same teams that you're going to be facing in the playoffs. You know,
Right.
right now we're more than likely going to get into the playoffs. It's not a lock, it's not a guarantee, but we are in control of that. The teams that we play, we win one more, possibly two more, and we're in, right? One more, and it's probably still 75% chance. Um, but man, you cannot fall apart in the fourth quarter. And the funny thing is, I looked at last year. Last year we were 32nd also. Right? We're used to this in the past, but we thought, okay, we've got a better defense, we got better coaches, and for the first half, we're doing well every week.
Our defense continued to let teams back into the game.
Correct. And our
Um,
offense, to your point, not to the degree every single week, but they start kind of
they
slowing
st-
down a little bit.
our offense
It's not
started in the
it's not every single
second
week.
half.
Um, but it's a combination. Offense doesn't produce like they were in at the first 2 or 3 quarters, and the defense starts getting soft.
Well, so basically, the one thing that we would complain about in years past was the slow starts. Well, now the team's getting off to a fast start, not only offensively and defensively, they're playing well, but they can't finish.
Right.
Something seemed to struggle offensively in some games in the second half, and in defense, we just all of a sudden start allowing teams to get back into games and make them close. It happens against the Chicago game. It happened in the New York game. It happened against the Saints. I mean, it just continues to happen. We allowed the Cowboys to hang around. So I don't know what the issue is, but I will say this, man. And I know we'll continue to get into some specifics of this game, but I just want to talk about the team as a whole, Ken.
Okay.
There's just two theories here, okay? And I want you to walk with me here.
Yep.
So there's the theory of people out there, and I think I myself struggle with this. So on one hand, you have the first year of a new regime with the GM, head coach, quarterback, and everything. And we're coming off a 4-win season. And all the success that they've had this year, there's this mindset of people out there where we should look at it kind of in a viewpoint with our blinders on and go, hey, look, man, we've won 8 games. We've won 9 games. We got our quarterback. We got a great GM. And look what they've done in one off season. And we've doubled our wins from the years past. We potentially going to make the playoffs here. And boy, you guys are complaining about this, that, this, and that, and some more of this and that. And you guys aren't grateful for what has happened for the 2024-2025 season Washington Commanders. And on one hand, I could agree with that.
Right.
That makes sense. Let's behave. We never if you had told me before the season started that we'd be 9 wins with the potentially to get to 11 and 12 wins, we would have took that all day, every day. Right? So that's one hand. The other hand of this is, man, we got a good GM, we got a good head coach, we got our franchise quarterback. At one point, we were the highest scoring offense in the league, right? We've been winning games, we're killing people. with a few hiccups here and there against like the Cowboys, but everybody else, man, we're killing them, we're blowing them out. We're about to go to the playoffs because we got a good team. So then, therefore, we feel like we can scrutinize the performance of this team.
Right.
And so then you get frustrated with this team when they don't do some things. Then when you get frustrated and you talk about what this team isn't doing and what they should be able to do, then the other side comes back and tries to remind you, well, we should be happy with what we're doing. So which is it? Should I be happy, just happy to be here? Or should I expect more because we've seemed to have found what we need to be a good quality team that is about to head in the playoff? Because when you, to your point, when you go to the playoffs, you're going to play those teams. You can't be getting 10 penalties a game. You can't allow 8 sacks. You can't sit here and falter and your defense pretty much stops tackling and allowing teams to score. Your offense all of a sudden can't get in the end zone. You can't do those things if you're going to go and be a playoff team. So should I just be happy to be here and just make the playoff? Right. So there's the dichotomy we have here, right? So which is it? And there's those two forms of thoughts here. And I myself can admit that I think I struggle with both. But at the end of the day, hey man, I don't know what to think about this team. They're frustrating, and I know it sounds weird that we're 9 wins and probably gonna make the playoffs, and you're frustrated. But I think the frustration is I think we're good, and I go back to what I said a few times. I think we're good, we're all right, but we're not ready. I don't think we're ready.
Yeah, and I think in both of your scenarios, you can carry a piece of both those scenarios, right? And part of it is how we got here. At the halfway point, if we would have been 4-4, and now we've gotten on a winning streak of 5 out of the last 6, everything's happy, right? You're 4-4. You say, we're still learning and everything's kind of getting together, and everything's, we're not quite gelling. A rookie quarterback, he's still learning. Now at this point, if we had won a few games in a row, especially like we were in the middle there when we were playing Cincinnati and we were playing Arizona, and we were just lighting it up, man. The offense could not be stopped. I mean, we went two full games without Tressway kicking a punt. If that would have been this past 2 weeks, even with the same record, you have a different approach. So it can come and go with both of them. I think there's a high when you're running on a streak of wins, and then when you're struggling and you're on a streak of losses, your evaluation, when you're winning, you overlook mistakes, right? We made mistakes, but man, we're so good, we can overcome those. You play good teams, but I'm kind of being extreme on that, but you point them out and you move on, right? When you lose those same mistakes, you sit there and you talk for 10, 15, 20 minutes on 2 or 3 plays. But it's a combination. Our defense is giving up points in the fourth quarter. Our offense is kind of has had moments of struggling in the second half, and 3 games in a row of a lot of penalties. That's not a good combination. Thankfully, knock on wood, everybody that's listening to this, we're not turning the ball over a lot. We have turned it over this year, but we have to be in the bottom 5 or 7 teams in the NFL for turnovers. That's interceptions and fumbles. We've done a really good job of protecting the ball this year. With one of the things I don't know if you saw with this game that hopefully leads to some success the rest of the year is with Marshawn Lattimore. I forget these numbers might not be exact, but he was in there and played for like 53 plays, not a single catch. And I don't even know if they threw at him a single
No,
time.
no targets. No
Yeah, no,
targets.
no targets, no receptions. Um, Now they don't have all pro, all star wide receivers in New Orleans, but a quick glance over to where he was and who he was covering, they quickly decided to go another way. Whether that was pre snap or whether that was during the play, they didn't go his way. So hopefully that will help. You would have thought that would have helped us in the fourth quarter. That means the other 10 on 10 of the remaining players, we weren't doing well on 10 on 10.
Right.
So, but we will see. This is the first time. I wonder if now that there's a comfort from a coach's perspective and defensive perspective with Lattimore, if they rotate some zones different ways or coverage, or that they only need to play one safety, and they can bring a safety up instead of two, and the safety will just be on the opposite side of wherever Lattimore lines up. It's these kinds of things that you can start doing when you like. We do have. We're not used to having a lockdown corner. We may have one here.
Yeah.
Time will
There was
tell.
a little bit of me that was kind of hoping that, as the game was going along, we weren't blowing out, pulling away and blowing the team out, and I was kind of hoping it would stay somewhat close because you hear the coaches talk about the players listen, they gain more, and you can teach better from ugly wins,
Right.
right? When it's a bad loss or it's a blowout, you tend to cannot get through the guys. But when it's an ugly win, a lot of teaching can come from that. And so I was kind of hoping that would be kind of an ugly win. And so silver lining to me, and where I'm going with this is the fact that they won, but they barely won and won ugly, will have them not overreacting to the W. And so what they'll do is I'm hoping that the focus would be there, and as saying we were fortunate against the Saints, but we can't do this next week against Philly. And I'm hoping that attention to detail and getting back to it make them be a little more focused as they prep for Philadelphia, because it's a big deal.
Yeah.
But what was interesting though is Washington won the game barely,
Right.
but prior to that, it had been 22 years since Washington won a game coming off of a bye week. Did you realize that?
That's
The
crazy.
last time the last time was 2002.
That is crazy.
2002 week 5 against the Titans. So we had never won a game in 22 years coming off a bye week. And that game against the Saints broke that streak, but we barely won the game.
Right.
It was
It,
awful.
it,
It was ugly
it
game.
it's funny because I know when they first started coming out with a bye week, however many years ago, and it may have been right about that time, that everybody looked at that as being a big advantage, but the wins and losses coming out of a bye week across the NFL isn't that high. You would think that the team coming out of the bye would win whatever percentage more.
Mhm.
It may be a pinch more, but it's not that significant. Now 22 years is a ridiculous streak, obviously, but across the NFL, it's not that big of a deal. I think this game also pointed. This is the big glaring hole of Austin Eckler. We had almost nothing out of the backfield. Uh, B Rob carried the load. McNichols and Rodriguez combined for 3 carries. Right. B Rob had 21 carries, a couple catches a few catches out of the backfield. And I like B Rob catching it out of the backfield, but he's not the same as Austin Eckler. We still have a couple weeks at least of Eckler being out, and so he'll come back either potentially either against Atlanta or Dallas. hopefully, the recovery and everything works out to be that like that, and we have him into the playoffs. I'm sure he
I think
wants to
he'll
be
be back.
also. Pardon
I
me?
think he'll be back because when you watch the practices, he was out on the field going through warm ups and moving around, and so I think it's just a matter of precautions. I think after his 4 week stint on the IR, I think he'll be back. Um, and that was just based on seeing him out there moving around and doing all the stuff he was doing. He can't practice, obviously, due to being in the protocol, but I think he'll return after the 4 week deal. Um, this game was also just kind of a side note here. We talked about not only return of Lattimore to New Orleans against his former team, but Chase Young, right?
Right.
We talked about it on the last podcast about whether or not Chase Young would get any sacks or would have an impact on the game, and he did. He did. Oddly enough, he ended up with 2 sacks on Jayden Daniels. So he made an impact, and he had some good pressures and things of that nature. Which in the past he was good at getting pressure. He just
Right.
wasn't getting sacks. But that being the case, he wasn't the only one. They had 8 sacks total, and so um, we have to question. We don't know, but we have to question: was the absence of Tyler Biotish being able to recognize and call the game and get everybody lined up, whether or not that affected the run game? Did that affect the penetration and the number of sacks that Jake Daniels had? Now, you mentioned doing when we talked about it during the game, you mentioned and rightfully so that there were some times that Jayden held on the ball too long and created some of those sacks, but he was under pressure. He was under duress quite a bit during that game, and there was times he got out of sacks due to his athleticism and his running ability. And but man, Tyler Biotish being out and listening to some of the beat reporters, they said that even though Cosme played, he didn't seem well. And I don't
Right.
know if that's they got each other sick or anything of that nature because Biotish's scratch from the game wasn't due to an injury; it was due to illness. And so did one guy get the other guy sick?
Right.
Type deal. But man, he seemed to have been missed, and the offensive line and the offensive play seemed to have shown that they were missing our starting center, Tyler Biotish.
Yeah, and I think while Jaden was um pretty accurate most of the game, I still like what we talked about pregame for the Tennessee game of being a little bit more vanilla and come against the Titans. We started out the first handful of plays, first couple series where everything was short, and it was quick passes, quick passes, quick passes to get the pressure off of the offensive line. Get it out of Jaden's hands and get it to a playmaker, whether it's Terry, uh, whether it's Brown, whoever. Um, I think I've said it before a couple weeks ago. I, I don't know that they can, or maybe it's a Brown issue, but man, they got to find a way of getting De'Ami Brown open. Um, and whether it's a quick slant to him, I don't know what he hasn't been a what I would call a true number two ever since he's been here. But when you do see him catch it and he has just a little bit of room to run or make a move, he just moves different. He runs different. He gets up to speed in a step and a half. He's one of those guys, and I'm not saying he'll ever be even in the ballpark of Terry, but let's find a way of getting him the ball and make a move and take you know a 3 to 5 yard pass and turn into 15, 20, or even potentially take it to the house. I think we need to get a little bit more vanilla early on and then expand from there. um
I hear what you're saying about De'Ami Brown, man, but he's been here long enough, and he's
i
been
i
through
know i know
more than one regime, and yet the production or lack thereof is still the same, right? They're seeing this guy in practice every day. He came out with a clean slate. With I mean, he's one of the few guys that they held over from the previous
Yep.
regime. They see him in practice every day, and yet They're still not scheming him up. He's not getting on the field, getting more snaps. I mean, it just got to tell you there's something about the player.
I don't disagree. I don't
But
disagree.
but
Yeah.
but where I don't understand though is you go out and you draft tight end Ben Sinnott. You go out and you draft Luke McCaffrey. You
Yeah.
trade or you pick up, not trade, but you pick up Zacchaeus and all of these guys, and yet these guys aren't getting touches. I mean, we've been waiting for Luke McCaffrey to have a breakout game since he was drafted.
Right.
Right? This kid's got I think he has 12 catches.
Yeah.
On the year, and he's supposed to be. You listen to any of the podcasts of the beat reporters, and I listen to a lot of John Kime report, and they're saying this guy's always open, and I recognize that he may not be the primary read, but if they're going back and watching film and self scouting, and you're watching the play, you see it all the time. Somebody will run a play, and then you missed the guy, and they'll talk about it. And they go, "Okay, we're going to run that later in the game because we missed you the first time." I mean, Luke McCaffrey's, they say he's always open. And yet he is still not a big part of our offense. You figure with Noah Brown going out for the rest of the season. But no, we saw Jamison Crowder, not Ben Sinnott, not Luke McCaffrey. And then Zach Ertz get hurt during the game. You figure you'd see Ben Sinnott or Luke McCaffrey. It's like I don't understand what is going on with these guys. And
Right.
and I understand game flow affects some of that. But man, we're what? Week 15? The team has played 14 games and the season's almost over. And we're
Right.
still asking for Ben Sinnott and Luke McCaffrey.
Well, it's funny because I happen to have Ben Sinnott and Luke McCaffrey written down here with a circle around them because these offensively, that's who we went and got through the draft, right? Our defensive, Newton and uh, Sandersill and a few of the other guys defensively have come in and contributed, but our offensive weapons that we went and got have done very little, right? Obviously, other than Jaden at number one pick, but our tight end and Luke and really most people when they reviewed the draft thought that we did well picking up both of those guys at that point in the draft. And look, I'm not trying to write them off or nothing, not even close to that, but we've had minimal production from them this year,
Right.
As rookies.
Yeah. But a little bit back on the game here. As soon as they missed the 2-point conversion, which by the way was the right call, not 2-point conversion, which was the right call in my opinion by the Saints.
Right.
And some folks at the bar were excited and immediately celebrated that we won the game. It was hard for me to celebrate that, man. That was once again a game that never should have been as close as it was, and it should not have come to that. And it was a situation where we dominated time possession. 40 minutes of time possession, they had less than 20, 19.
Right.
We had a little over 40. It wasn't quite 41, and they had 19 and some change.
Right.
And yet we almost lost the game. Anyone who was talking about that game, trying to pick who would win this game, talked about all you had to do was worry about Alvin Kamara. Eric Kamara, I think, missed most of the fourth quarter. I don't remember when he went out. He was 5 carries for 12 yards rushing, 4 receptions for 58 yards and a touchdown. Essentially a non-factor. And we almost lost that game.
Right.
Right. There was nothing to celebrate. And I know that, like as you said earlier, a win's a win. It is, man, but good Lord, this is not good, man. And if you're gonna tell me that we're gonna make the playoffs and we should be happy about that, then what I'm seeing is not gonna be good enough. It's just not gonna be good enough.
Yeah.
And I for many, 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 many years, when all my Cowboy haters would come and talk to me about how they made the playoffs, That was probably one of the number one things I used to always tell them. You get one more game than we got. As bad as we were and as good as you were, you get one more game than we got. Your vacation started 1 week after ours
Right.
because you were one and done. Because you don't play just to make the playoff. You play to win Super Bowls. And just because you made the playoffs and you one and done, I mean, I don't know whether we can celebrate it as a franchise because I know we're starting to turn it around.
Correct.
But at the end of the day, there ain't a whole lot to celebrate, dog.
Oh, I think I'm going to disagree on that. I think the turnaround that I mean, look at all the because of all the turnover from the Ron Rivera era, the horrible drafting, the horrible free agency, the just everything all the way around, didn't have a franchise quarterback. How many players did you have to build on? Right. And that you turned it around from a second pick in the NFL draft to a playoff contending, potentially playoff team playoff bound team.
Playoff team. We're not playoff contending team. We're playoff team, Ken.
Correct.
Not
But
playoff
a playoff bound team at this point. That's a huge turnaround. Now, again, the way that we're kind of sputtering here over the last 3 or 4 weeks, 4 out of 5 weeks, 3 out of 5 weeks, whatever it is, it is concerning. It takes a little bit of the sweetness out. Like I said, if these games that we're struggling with were early in the season, as opposed to this point of the season, but the record was the same, we'd be viewing this differently. We've got a lot to build on. And like I said, if we're one and done this year, that is a successful year. I'm not going to, will I be let down a little bit? Yeah, because I built my expectations up high because of all of our successes, early in the year, but it's not going to do away with what we accomplished and where we are, and the future is looking bright. We're not doing it with smoke and mirrors, like we did with Ron Rivera. Even half of his wins, not that there was a ton of them, but even half of those wins were with smoke and mirrors and moments of Taylor Heineke having moments here and there, right? Or whatever player it was at the time having a moment here or there. So time will tell. We'll see how this the rest of the season plays out.
Okay. I stand by what I said. I mean, I understand that if you're looking as a Washington fan and you've turned this around and made it to the playoffs, I mean, it's a good sign. But for teams that are just making it to the playoffs and getting one and done, okay.
Well, there's a difference between the Cowboys doing that for 4 years, 5 years, 5 out of 6 years, a year or two in there, not going to the playoffs, and when they do, they're always one and done, right? This is something that we don't go in at all. We're not even sniffing the playoffs.
Because you're talking as a Washington fan. But if you're a Cowboy fan, you're Eagles fan, they don't care. They don't care about it. The fact is that you go and you lose that first game, they're going to give you a bunch of crap,
right? But they don't have our perspective. Their perspective and our perspective. They just want to trash talk. Fine, you can say whatever you want.
That's why I said you're talking as a Washington fan.
Well, that's the only way I have to talk. That's the way anybody who evaluated this team that wasn't a fan of any team would evaluate, and saying what they've put together is going to be trouble for the NFC East, potentially for the NFL for a number of years, right? Because when we talked about the season, we talked about, we didn't even talk about playoffs. Playoffs, we didn't even talk about. We talked about how we're going to look potentially.
See, now you're talking like the other side. That's what I was talking about.
No. What I'm talking about is where we are moving forward is in a positive direction. If this had been what we're going through this year, and let's just move forward, that we are one and done in the playoffs. If that was the fourth year, then yeah, you have problems, right? That's why Buffalo Bills give grief all the time, whether it was in the 80s, 80s, 90s, when they couldn't get over the top, or over the last 3 or 4 years where they keep on getting up to the edge and they can't quite make it to the Super Bowl. That's a different scenario, but at the same time, Washington fans would love to be in that spot. I'm not saying we want to be in the Cowboys spot and be one and done, but I want to be a contender every year, and Washington is headed in that direction. I think, again, if you're only talking about this 1 year, we're doing well. If we repeat this season for 2 or 3 more years, the exact same, where we're one and done, then yeah, we got problems.
Okay. All right.
So, but it was. I was like you when the game ended. We were at the sports bar, and I would probably say 80% of the Commanders fans jumped and cheered. And you and I were the only ones who were like,
Right, time to go.
glad we won. Glad we won.
Yep.
I didn't cheer. I might have given like 2 claps, but I definitely didn't jump up and cheer and do whatever. It was clap, clap, we won. And man,
I think my initial reaction was, I can't celebrate that. I'm glad we won, because this is going to be bad, but I'm glad we won.
Right. I mean, I noticed, I was surprised because I noticed that you were pretty much like me. We're glad we won, but I noticed as much as everybody cheered, I was like, holy cow, that wasn't a cheer worthy of that, or that win. The way we won, the way we got to that point, I didn't think was worthy of that.
I know I didn't.
So it is what it is. Anything else you have on this game, Reg?
Nope. On to Philadelphia.
On to Philadelphia. We'll follow up on this. We'll get a little bit clearer picture of where we stand healthy wise when we go to do this. That the first injury report comes out on Wednesday, I believe, and we'll see how this game rolls out. This game will be in Washington. It'd be nice to get things right. I think you and I can both agree, if we play like we did against New Orleans Saints with the mistakes, it's not going to be a pretty game. But time will tell. We'll talk about that game and the direction that both teams are going, and what it's going to take for Washington to walk out with a win. But
by the way, and so Ken and I had tickets to the game, and we're not going to be able to make it. And so anyone listening to this podcast, if you are interested in going to the game, we have 2 tickets that we will sell directly. That way you don't have to go through the SeatGeek app and pay all the additional fees. And so you can just contact us right there. You can comment on this podcast that you're interested in. We can communicate that way, or you can hit us up on Twitter. That's scrolling down at the bottom of the screen there, the 2 Knuckleheads on Twitter. And from there, we can discuss. Like I said, we're not trying to, gouge people. We're just trying to sell the tickets. And so everything is fair. There's no parking pass, just 2 good seats. They're under the overhang there, so you're protected out of the elements and things of that nature. But if you're interested, hit us up, and we'll get you 2 tickets, man. We rather them go to Commander fans and not Eagles fans. So just hit us up if you're interested.
Yep, and as he mentioned, if you're, I did look, the SeatGeek fees normally on that is like $45 per ticket. So if we sell them direct, that right there saves you $90 by buying them off of us directly, as opposed to buying those exact same seats through SeatGeek. But we will we'll get them directly to you and go from there and save some money. But till next time. Peace out, Knuckleheads.
Peace out.